but is message handling. And it's my thought that that may be something coming down the pike that could be quite handy to have. If you got a buddy that's got a daughter somewhere off on the West Coast or something or whatever, maybe you'd like to get a short message to her that, well, the bomb did hit, but the hurricane did happen, but I'm okay. Yeah. And so it's one thing to get those skills, but then you have to have your station that can handle not having power from the grid, be able to communicate. And this is something that interests me. And so I've over the years I've done a fair amount with solar power, and um, I don't know. To me, it's something that I don't know, a little bit of an insurance policy, maybe, or maybe at some point. I mean, I lived in Bethany, and we were always getting knocked off the grid for sometimes months at a time, and certain, different places I was, and uh, I kind of rented, and my landlords would be without heat, without power, and I'd be happy as a clam, talking around the world on sunlight and stuff. And so I don't know if that interests anybody, but if it does, I wouldn't mind talking about it a little bit.
I've got a story on that, but I have to go out and turn something on the grill for a minute. I'll be right back.
All right.
Yeah, actually, Bobcat, that's something you and I had talked about doing this summer, is getting together and putting together a solar system, get a couple panels.
Yeah.
Looking at the monocrystalline, but you had said you knew a place that either refurbishes them or you can get them discounted in some way.
Well, I don't know if that's so true. And I think things are changing with the world situation. A lot of these solar panels are coming out of China.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long that's going to be available. And
yeah, so at least stocking up on a few to have on hand.
Be good, yeah. And another thing that also interests me is CB as a form of communication that would help people who weren't radio operators if the grid goes down. With a small solar panel and a small battery, you could at least have some form of communication when nothing else worked.
Tying in with that, here's a question for you. Do you think more people today are on CB or on the FRS and GSMRS type radios?
I think more people are on the FRS and GSMRs, but I do think, and I may be wrong about this, but I think CB has a better range. Basically, I mean, you could cover a town like Wallingford or Meriden or New Haven or whatever with just CBs usually put out 5 watts, which is, you can get a town-wide communication, and that coupled with a couple of hams scattered around, who also, and this is just an idea I had to try to, because a lot of people don't have the time or inclination to get a ham license, but still need communications. And I think CBs, possibly some of the FRS stuff and other things combined with this, might be a viable way for communication without, without costing a whole lot of money. One thing, I've had this idea for quite some time, And I went to many hamfests. When I worked for John B, we would travel all over the place. And occasionally somebody would be selling a CB and for like 10 or 5 or $10 usually. And so I'd pick it up and throw it in my box. And some of these things work, some of them don't. A lot of them receive only because somebody's blown up the transmit side. But I just see this as something that, if you had a car, you could hook it up easily to a car where you wouldn't even need solar power. You could just or you could use a small panel to charge a small battery and get some. And my thought was and I want to do this in the Haven, is to get a sort of a, like we have our nets. I want to have a CB net in the Haven for different people. So maybe you don't have the CB, but you know somebody that does. So if you got to get a message somewhere, you can. Yeah, I don't know. So
I'll tell you, Bob, that there's been, even in this club, there's probably a lot of individuals that got their start in Citizens Band Radio. And you're looking at one of them. But that was back when I was probably 11 or 12 years old.
right.
But I had a pretty good station when I was I had bought it with my own money, bought a vertical ground plane type of antenna. I joined a group, was known as the Bowie Rat Patrol down in Maryland. And,
Wow.
we did a lot of stuff for the town as well as for ourselves. And I've seen it, I've seen the tide come and go on Citizens Band over the years, but I think it's kind of stood the test of time. It's still there. It's still being used. And then sure, if people are going to use it, it's a way to contact them. So there's nothing wrong with it. Some people look down on Citizens Band. I don't. A lot of people don't. Some do. But I don't think it's good or bad. It's just another communications medium, just like GMRS or FRS.
Could
To
you
answer
tell me
that
a little bit
question,
about
Tim,
FRS?
I think GMRS and FRS, they're another niche or a gap, because a lot of people, like you said, Bob, don't want to go through getting a license, the expense, or you got to be technical when you get a license. You have to know some stuff, and it's not always easy. You can do it. It's not specifically hard, but Citizens Band is, you don't have to pass a test anymore for that. I got my CB license when you had to actually pass a test and get your call sign. And I still remember what that was, unfortunately.
Here's a thought for you. You've got GMRS repeaters going up in some areas, and that can use a lot of power. Ham radio licenses really are more, in my mind, if you really want to not just do local VHF, UHF, but if you really want to talk like to Carolinas or to Brazil or Bolivia or whatever. But in a pinch, just like when you stepped away and your splash screen came up and said, when all else fails, you use the equipment you got.
Right.
And a lot of us have picked up, like Bob there, I've got probably 6 CB radios I've picked up at different ham auctions and ham fests, and I just couldn't turn them down. And they've collected in a pinch. Perfectly legal, I can hand them to somebody and say, here's a CB radio, here's how to use it. And they'll have some kind of communication. So really, push comes to shove, I think we're going to use all of it. We use ham radio, CB, GMRS, FRS. It's all good.
Could somebody explain to me? I'm not very familiar with GRS and the other one. Could you explain?
Yeah.
What the range is for these things and how they work a little bit?
So GMRS, I forget. I think you can use 5 watts.
Yeah, I can say right now I got the chart up.
I think it's a lot more than that, but I could be wrong.
Well, a repeater can use 50. If you're operating a repeater, you can use 50. But the handhelds they're limited.
Yeah, no, the ranges vary. It's for GMRS1, which starts at 462.56. It's narrow band, and it's going to use high power, so that's 5 watts.
Mhm.
But when you get down to GMRS 8 through 14, yep, 14, it's going to go to low power, which I believe is 1.5 watt, maybe 1 watt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. And it's all, so for GMRS, it's usually 70 centimeters, Bob, 440.
Yeah.
There are some 2-meter frequencies you can use in there, but FRS, you don't need a license. GMRS, you need a license. So if you have a GMRS license, anybody in your entire family can use your license. In other words, you can equip your entire family with radios, use your license and communicate legally. Now, a lot of people they look at it like, I really don't care about a license, but FRS, you don't need a license. GMRS, you need a license.
And what is the story on FRS? Is that low power?
It's lower power than GMRS.
I see.
Yeah,
So
it's usually 1 watt, and it's the family relay service. So it's
Right.
basically you're gonna be using one of these things.
I see.
It has no like real code plug. All the frequencies are already programmed in. You get a plus and minus for your channel select, and as long as you're on the same channel as somebody else, you're gonna pick up.
Not for nothing, Bob. If you have a Bofang, you can program that for GMRS or FRS. That's a $25 radio, and it's got 5 watts. If you get the UV9 RS, it's 8 watts. And again, you can program that for just about anything in the VHF and UHF bands, which is kind of scary, if you're a legalese kind of person, because you can program it for even frequencies you're not supposed to be on. So you got to be careful about that.
Have you heard about the UV5R, GT5R?
GT5R? No, I haven't.
If you look it up, I was able to get one before they all went out of stock. But Dave Kessler on YouTube does a lot of YouTube
I know
videos.
this name. I
Yeah,
can't recall him, but I know
OG.
this name.
He's
Oh,
something
he's
OG. Anyhow, he did a test because he got sent one, and the UV5R he showed on a scope how it had all those harmonic frequencies and all that. Then he showed the GT5R. Here's your transmit frequency. Everything else is dead.
Really?
Yeah.
Didn't
So you
know
may
about
want
this.
to look into it. It might finally redeem the name Bofang from all those people who say, "Get that piece of junk out of here."
Yeah.
Well, the notorious thing about Bofangs are their audio. You have to close talk that microphone because
Yeah.
it is so deaf, and
Yep.
I know that from personal experience.
Because we've all had one of them.
That's
So
by
let me
design.
ask you this. Hey, how you doing?
Hey, John, how you doing? Hi, Ted.
What
Good.
do you think would be better to use something like a Bofang or some of these older CB radios that some of us have?
Well, CB radios work on 27 megahertz and Bofangs work on usually 2 and 440.
Yeah.
So use it for what?
Right. It
Well,
depends on use.
you came in a little late, John. I was kind of talking about something that I kind of feel I've been kind of mulling and working on slightly over a few years. And that is communications, if the grid goes down for whatever reason, among people who are not necessarily hams, who could interface with hams. And my thought was to use CB radios. I mean, you dragged me around to a lot of ham fests, and I picked up a lot of CB radios for $5 and $10. And I haven't really done too much with them. They're just sitting in boxes. But my thought was if you could equip people with CB radios and maybe start something like a CB net one night a week or something, that might be something that would be valuable. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, John?
Well, certainly any band that a Bofang will operate on either requires a license or it's illegal to use it. You can't use a Bofang legally on FRS, for example. CB is you don't need a license, or well, you don't need a license for CB. You can get CB radios at lots of tag sales for cheap. You got a bunch of them, you can hand them out to your friends. The antennas are cheap and you can get them at truck stops and whatnot. It's a way to get started. A lot of hams started with CB. You know, CB is radios are as good as the people that use them. And so you can get started with I have not been on Citizens Band in well over 30 years, so I have no, people refer to it as a wasteland, and how terrible it is, and this and that and the other kind of thing. How is it really? I don't know.
Well, here's another perspective, and yeah, I've heard the same things, John. But another perspective is CB is probably a little more affordable than the others. It's got a few more watts of power. And in my early days, when I was, in my teen years, I used to be able to talk skip even with 4 watts. Now I had a sideband CB rig, which is 12 watts. Oh, yay. But that thing was really allowed me to speak to all corners of the states, with 12 watts of power on sideband. So depending on what you get and your antenna, of course, everything is in the antenna. Family radio service, you're limited in power to basically a watt, which is line of sight. And in even GMRS, you're still line of sight. And that's what it's designed for. That's what it's for, being able to operate in a small area, not too far from each other. If you've got a hunting party, you can all use FRS or GMRS. If you've got a hiking party, or if you're out camping or something like that with your families, certainly that would suffice it. At the EOC or the OEM where we meet, usually when we're allowed to meet up there in Yalesville, believe it or not, we have a CB radio that's in one of our Go kits. And the plan is to be able to listen to all frequencies, including FRS, GMRS, amateur radio frequencies, and citizens band frequencies, to be able to listen to everything that might be transmitted in case someone needs help on one of those bands. So we have the ability there to be able to listen in with the right antenna, the right gear, the right radio and whatnot, to be able to listen on it. So is it popular? That's a question for other people. I can't tell you if it's popular or not, but people still use it. I know people still use it because I still hear people on there, even on Citizens Band.
Yeah, I monitor, haven't really done much transmitting, maybe a little bit, but I do monitor CB sometimes. And I also got started in CB, I don't know, 40 years ago or something, I don't know. But I guess I feel that its popularity has diminished quite a bit.
Yeah.
Which may not be a bad thing. I mean, I don't really appreciate hearing a lot of foul mouth stuff going on. And it's not all that way. Some of it is, but there's channels available, so you could maybe say, okay, we meet on channel 23 at 7 o'clock on Friday night or whatever, and that's our CB net, which I was thinking of possibly trying to get started. And one way, I mean, most people have a car, and it's a way, well, you need gas to run the car a little bit while you're transmitting, maybe, but or off and on occasionally, but it's a way, if communications go down, that there might be communications available to people who don't want to be hams. And certainly with message handling, if somebody's got a CB and they want to get a message to their daughter off in the West Coast, you might be able to do that, you know. So
Good.
I don't know. I just throw this out because it's something that I've been interested in for a while. And I just want to hear other people's input on this and thoughts. And there's been some good discussion already.
That's why we have a CB Go box at the firehouse. We're ready to go. We have a CB radio and an ammo can and with a battery, and we're ready to, with an antenna, and we're ready to fire up if anywhere we have to, so we can reach out to those people. We also have a FRS Go box for the exact same purpose. So yeah, you're right. All means of public communications are should be monitored during any kind of a disaster situation.
I guess my thought was to try to perhaps equip some people, some of the people I know with CBs, and try to have some sort of perhaps a regular net that people could check into that would give people the skills they need to use to communicate, because I don't think CB is that popular right now as it was at one point. I mean, back in the 70s and 80s, seems like everybody had one in their car, you know. I know.
Well, the only way you're going to find out, Bob, is do it.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna try, but I wanted to throw it out to this group to see other people's thoughts before I kind of put all my eggs in one basket.
Well, it's not putting all your eggs in one basket. It's, you know, you have the equipment for the most part. Try it and see where it goes. And if it works out well, great. If it doesn't, well, now you know what doesn't work.
Good one.
Actually,
Okay.
along with Bob's line of thought there, as far as our club, what is our emergency response plan? Like, when do we know to jump onto the repeater? What happens if the repeater goes down and if there's no power to it, the backup's fail? What are our protocols as a club?
Well, first of all, we self-alert. In other words, if you think there's going to be disaster, you want to pay attention to the repeater frequency. If the repeater goes down for any reason, we will operate simplex on that frequency so that you only have to monitor the one frequency. We do not self-deploy if we're working through the town. We have to wait for an order from the town to be deployed. So, and we can't stress that enough. We do have a plan in place. There's a copy down at the firehouse. Soon, hopefully that will be available to people. But we do have a plan in place working with the town CERT and emergency services. And, you know, that's basically it. We would activate the firehouse upon request and activate the radios there. But I recommend monitoring the repeater. If the repeater is down, I have all my radios programmed for talk around, which is simplex on the repeater output. And that way anybody out there can reach out to anybody on simplex and only has to monitor the one frequency. You don't have to also monitor 5.2. You can, but you don't have to. Does that sort of answer your question, Sean?
Yeah, it does.
Hey, Eric.
Yes, sir.
Simplex is great, but for a lot of us who obviously couldn't hit and make it from like Farmington here and other members a little further away with Simplex, do you have a backup HF protocol?
We don't, but we have net frequencies on 10 meters, 28,375, and 6 meters, 50.175. And I personally would recommend 6 meters because it's quieter, and we have a 3 element beam at the firehouse, and we have activities on 6 meters on Monday night and Wednesday nights. So not officially, but that would be the HF backup. That also the Connecticut phone net on, what is it, 3973, I think it is now.
Right.
That's something you'd monitor in any kind of a disaster outside of the town boundaries, or anything regional or across the state.
No, that's great. I wouldn't.
And
even
we'd
have
also
thought-
fit into the ARES plan because we're members of the ARES as well. So if Area 2 Douglas comes up and says, we're going to do an operation on this frequency, we need you, then we would switch to that frequency. But we've been encouraging people to improve their 2-meter antennas so that they can talk out on simplex rather than relying on just a walkie-talkie. So several of us has put up antennas. We have pretty good range from person to person on simplex. And you'd be surprised at what the range is. And Douglas has a backup station at the North Haven Public Health Department on Hartford Turnpike, I think it is. And he could come up here and operate a simplex station from up there if he felt the need to do that. So, and we've also, he could operate from our EOC if he wanted to do that too. So we have options in this area. We don't want to get too locked into one option, but you know, we want to be flexible, and that's what we've tried to be. That's why we have the go boxes on all these other bands as well as the amateur bands.
That's great. How long would the repeater keep running on when you're off of shore power? What's the?
If we go to battery power, and we just replaced the battery this past year, I think it's like a 200 ampere hour battery. It's a deep cycle. John K1LYP dealt with his battery dealer because he buys batteries by the pallets every month. And he picked out the battery. We put it in. The battery will go down to either 8 or 12 watts. I'm not sure, but it should last close to a week, depending again upon usage. So if it's used a lot, it's not going to last as long,
Sure,
but it would.
sure, but even if it's a handful of days, that's
Yeah,
pretty
it would give us enough time to get up there
Right.
with a generator, and we do have generators to do that.
Right.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Thank you very much, Eric.
Yep.
One thing about simplex that can extend range, many members of our club have done some satellite work. And if you have one of those aero antennas, which is fairly ubiquitous, not totally, but that you could use to point in the direction you wanted to go and orient it to the right polarity, and it would work on either 70 centimeters or, you know, it's limited in, I think most of the arrows you're not supposed to run more than 10 watts into, but that might be a help, just saying.
Yeah, those antennas, Bob, and I've got one. There's a diplexer in it or a duplexer in it that's limited 10 watts. If you bypass that circuit, then you're only limited by your common sense, and you don't want to feel warm when you're transmitting, in other words.
Or coax.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, mine, I bought mine without the diplexer, duplex or whatever, and I have an external duplexer that's good for high power if I want to use that. But yeah, I mean you can run a crap load of power through it then.
Right. So I have a question for those folks that are my Elmers. We have an opportunity to possibly change our 6-meter beam over to a 2-meter, 70 centimeter, 6-meter beam. But it requires 2 feed lines, one for the 2-meter, 70 centimeter, and one for the 6-meter. And I understand we can use a duplexer on that. Can someone briefly explain how a duplexer actually works? Can we use one feed line for 2 different bands?
That's more or less what a duplexer does.
You get one of these.
or a triplexer it might be.
Yeah, this is a duplexer. The one antenna will feed a dual band radio on both bands. This is before they built them into the radios. This was an older Kenwood that I have that was in one of my Go boxes. And this thing will do exactly that. So that's an option for you, Rob.
So we can feed whatever signal we want into the duplexer, one transmission line up to the antenna, or maybe put the duplexer up at the antenna.
Well,
You would, if you want to split, I think you would need a triplexer.
yeah, you'd have to get it for the bands because they're basically filters, like a tune cavity and a duplexer on a repeater. So you'd have to get it specific to the two bands you're operating. The other problem with consolidating everything into one antenna, you can only point in one direction at a time. So, you know, the 6 meter antenna has to go where the log periodic goes, but you know, it'd be nice to have another antenna available that we could put up an emergency and maybe put it in another direction to use for point-to-point transmissions. Then again, if you're in a disaster situation, you're going to have people from outside the disaster area going to help you, and you only have to reach that first layer of help. And with their home stations and their base stations, they can relay messages from there out into the real world. So that's another technique you're going to use in a disaster. So we have something bad happens in Wallingford, all our communications goes down. We got somebody in Waterbury or Hartford or something. As long as we can reach those people, we can get our traffic out to them, and then they can relay it to the greater distances with far more effective equipment and systems. If it's a whole regional situation, then that becomes a different ballgame.
Okay, the other question is, what radio are you going to use, Rob?
Like an FT991 or TS2000.
Okay, then you have separate antenna ports for 6 meters is usually going to be on the HF port,
Right.
and 2 and 440 are going to be on the
Another.
VHF port, VHF UHF port. So
Clarify something for me.
What-
I
what
always
is-
thought that that 6 meters was the bottom of VHF.
well, technically, yes, you're correct, Ted. VHF is 30 to 300 megahertz, and UHF is 300 to 3 gigahertz, and HF is 3 to 30 megahertz. And but when you're talking about real life, if you will, most of the manufacturers put 6 meters on the HF port and 2 and 440 on a second antenna port.
That's the way it is with the two radios that I just put out there, the
Yeah.
FT991 and the TS. So the question that I now have is, so let's say I've got a 991, I've got 2 RF ports coming out of the radio. They go into a duplexer, one transmission line that gets out to the antenna, another duplexer at the antenna that splits it back off to each one. Would that work?
I have no idea.
Probably, if you had separate antennas for,
I can tell you, it's a Cushcraft beam that's got one feed line for 2 meter 70 centimeter and another feed line for the 6 meter.
do it right and just run 2 feed lines.
Nah, that's not what I'm asking. You're not getting out that easy, John.
My suggestion is put up a separate antennas.
Nah, you guys are coming up with alternate.
More practical ones.
Nah. What's
I-
practical is to run one feed line that I already have in the tubes and use diplexers.
Well,
Or
what I would
duplexers.
do is contact the manufacturer of these devices and ask them, because they would have that all figured out.
All right.
Whereas us, we might burn up some filters in the process of experimenting on something that was either doomed to fail or there was another solution.
All right. Well, I'm either going to be troubleshooting and testing with 1 watt or 2 watts, doing exactly what I just said, or I'm going to call. I think that was a pretty good idea, calling the manufacturer.
Yeah.
Okay, bye.
Is it Michael?
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. So, hey, welcome to Bart, N1BRL, and Jim, N1ZN, and our esteemed Poobah, W1YSM Ed, and Randy, WRJY807,
So,
and Brent Moyer.
so one thing occurs to me, that if we're planning for emergency communications, we better have a way of powering our station besides the grid. Some form of generating power and perhaps storing power. And that people who are also have some of the CBs are perhaps going to need some of the same kind of stuff, or some of the unlicensed people will. And
That's why we have all those hamsters in the cages at the EOC.
And we have, the EOC is generator powered, and most people that have CBs have cars to put them in, and the cars come with a 12-volt power supply. So if it's cold weather, that may not be an ideal situation, but in an emergency, it would work.
yeah,
I mean, when I worked at the hospital, people would come in to charge their phones because power was out in Meriden for like a week. And I'm saying to myself, why don't these people spend $3 and get a cigarette lighter adapter for their phone? They can charge their phone on their car battery. And you'd be surprised at how many people don't even think of something like that.
yeah.
Hey, Rob, just circling back, I'm pretty sure with a diplexer, you can put a diplexer on each end and run coax, just a single shot of coax. But again, if it's a depending how much coax, it might be cheaper to run 2 lengths of coax, but in theory, you can put a diplexer on both ends and 1 length of coax. Hey, speaking of emergency, since we're kind of on the topic of emergency communications, and I know in the club I've seen posted a poster which made me smile the first time I saw it, with the National SOS radio network, using activating civilians with their FRS radios as part of an emergency communications protocol. As the club, Eric, maybe I'll address this to you because you're kind of have the kind of oversight of this. How does the club, if it does, integrate that sort of protocol into its overall communications plan?
Well, of course, FRS is going to have a short range. Our big radios are modified so we can use outside antennas and high power and get on an FRS channel at the station. We also, I mentioned this before you came on, Eric, but we also have an FRS Go box. So if we have to take it out to a field location, we can monitor usually FRS 1 or 3 on the Go box. We also have an inventory of FRS radios that we have accessible to. And I programmed the 14 FRS simplex channels into all my portables, because all the portables have lots of memory now, so it's real easy to do. And if you have a DMR radio, you just program it in as a separate bank.
Not a number of clubs now are using FRS 1 as kind of the one to monitor anyway.
Yeah, 1 is the default one, and then 3 is like in all the preppers. They have the group of 3 where 3 minutes after the hour for 3 minutes or whatever. I don't remember the exact details, but that's so 1 or 3, we could monitor them both. We had a very large drill a couple of years ago up at Sheehan High School where we did believe it or not, a vaccine distribution, at least a simulation before anybody even knew how to spell COVID. And we used FRS radios for that. And we used FRS to link back from Sheehan High School to the firehouse. We had K1BDF at the firehouse, and he was easily able to communicate with us, even though we were inside the gymnasium on the far side of Sheehan High School. So this is a way to get radios into the hands of people that don't have licenses so they can communicate.
Yeah, no, we, as many of you know, we did a statewide drill, an FRS drill, back in 2006, the year after Hurricane Katrina. And we had me and Rod Lane and a couple other hams had set up a base station on Talcott Mountain, and just basically just a big vertical in the back of off the back of a car. And it was an all-day drill, and we had the local TV and radio stations publicize it to have people just take out their FRS radios, which they usually just using to keep track of kids or fishing or hiking. And we were able to hear and actually communicate, because we had, with a lot of these stations around the central part of Connecticut, and surprised a lot of us. And, these things are only putting out what, 500 milliwatts or whatever, yeah, or 100 milliwatts or 500, whatever. And we were able to have conversations with people on their bikes or out fishing or something. So with a good base station, actually, it was just a test. Mostly it was just a test for distance.
Well,
And
line of
it
sight
worked
is line
pretty
of
well.
sight.
Yeah, line of sight is line of sight. Right. So it's, we had, well, the stuff we did with our rocket, we had 72 miles with a couple of milliwatts. So yeah, line of sight is wonderful.
Yep.
So anyway, I was just curious. I know that's, as this is a topic.
Well, the government has made a tremendous effort into pushing NOAA weather radio as an alert device, and they want everybody to have a weather radio. They've since incorporated into the cell phones, so you can receive alerts on the cell phone, national disaster alerts or weather alerts or things like that. They could very easily push a similar public campaign to encourage people to buy these blister pack FRS radios, and they can use them. During the thing in New Orleans a few years ago, everybody was on Zello, which is a phone app, walkie-talkie phone app, and they had talk groups galore. They called it the Cajun Navy or something like that. And those guys were locating people that were in distress and passing on the information to them. And they weren't even using RF other than the cellular signal itself. So there's a lot of options out there. Your imagination, you're only limited by your imagination.
Yeah, I like your idea of just having some sort of public messaging. I know we had talked to Midland a while back because obviously they saw the business interest as well. If they were sponsoring it and pushing out their little blister pack radios, but then get behind a PR campaign. So it was, I think there's a lot there. We were just pleased at the communication range of these little radios.
One of the things we learn in CERT training is that if you're going into a disaster area, you're going to canvass an area with a lot of down buildings and houses and things like that. And you have to, once you clear a house or a building, there's an actual code involving an X where you mark the building saying it's been checked and this is what you found. And again, if people had these radios and kept them charged or had spare batteries, it would be an effective way. That's the second problem with that whole theory, but it would be an effective way for them to reach some people, especially those that might have some kind of an immediate need for emergency services that they can no longer get on a cellular network. So,
people that might be stuck in their houses.
Yes.
That was, have a broken leg in the basement.
Or you have debris on you and you're pinned in and you can't move.
Debris on you. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a number. Radio Relay International they picked up. We gave a free license. They basically gave them a free license to the national SOS stuff, and they whenever there's a hurricane or a flood coming in a certain area, they make sure the PSAs get out to the region. And we've recorded many years ago radio PSAs that they can put out and get people to get their batteries, know that they should be turning on the hour, do a 5-minute, if you're stuck, how to conserve power of the radio. And it's just more public awareness than anything else. It's just over 100 million of these radios out there. So it would be great if there was a little more orchestrated, but anyway, I'm big of whatever works, right? And I'm just a big fan of these, all this communication tools that are just sitting out in the public.
Well, our job is to be as flexible as we can so we can adapt to whatever that need is. And that's what we're trying to do.
No, it's cool. It's great. I'm just asking questions. I'm learning of how the club has integrated all these, and this is really appreciated. Thanks, Eric.
Yep.
So I have a probably a stupid question, but if I wanted to buy one of these blister pack FRS radios, Walmart,
Yeah.
Walmart.
Yep.
Walmart. Yeah.
Everybody
Or
sells them.
Amazon. Walmart
Oh,
or
Home
Amazon.
Depot.
Amazon, all those
Home Depot
places.
sells them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It-
Home Depot.
And if you want one with a power and a detachable antenna, get a Baofeng and program it to FRS. Just the FRF channels are narrow band and all the ham channels are wide band if you're going to program them, but that's really the only difference. So
Yeah.
they're 12.5 kilohertz apart and the hams are 25.
And so everybody needs to remember that when you're in an emergent situation or an emergency, you're allowed to transmit on any frequency, any band to obtain help for an emergent situation like that. So everybody needs to understand that too. So yeah, you're going to hear people say, well, you can't use a Baofeng for this or that, or you can't use that for this or that. But the reality is any way you can get the word out is the way you get help.
Anything goes at that point. You're right.
Even smoke signals.
They worked.
Semaphore.
your drum. Get
Those
your
of us that know the Morse code can send code signals by light.
drum.
Yep.
Cover great distances with a great amount of security. They worked well in World War II for the Navy because they were so secure. They were literally line of sight.
Yeah.
Thank you. This has been quite enlightening to me. And I think I'm probably going to try to go ahead with my little project and
Good.
we'll see how it goes.
The most difficult part of CB is the size of the antenna because it's literally, it's like 10 meters. So you're dealing with larger antennas for everything else being equal.
Yeah.
FRS radios are easier, but you'll probably get more range on a CB ground wave than you will with an FRS radio, unless you live at Talcott Mountain. So,
Does CB have a calling frequency? A calling channel?
CB channel 9
Nine.
used to be monitored.
That's the emergency channel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that would be a calling channel too,
Okay.
as far as I know.
AIM is the truckers channel, and my thought was to see if I could set up a network where people would check in once a week on a short CB net, similar to what we do in ham radio, just to keep their skills up, keep their radios working, all that stuff, and I don't know how much success I'm going to have with this, but I want to give it a shot.
In Alaska, which covers very, very wide areas, they use 5 megahertz simplex radios, 5 megahertz sideband radios. They have specific frequencies for that purpose. And all these off-grid preppers that are living out in the boondocks, not near anything, they're able to use those radios to communicate with other cabins and stuff and call for help. Another any port in a storm disaster would be a marine radio, because the Coast Guard has very good coverage and they monitor. As a matter of fact, if you key up on channel 9 or whatever on the Coast Guard, or 16, they'll probably DF you instantaneously, triangulate and know where you are. And I know the police departments are able to ping cell phone sites and get very close to your location because they do it in Meriden all the time when people get lost on Meriden Mountain. They tell them to turn the cell phone on and they can pinpoint where on Meriden Mountain they are, where on the West Peak, and find them that way. Very useful devices.
Cool.
Well, now that we all got our, or most of us got our COVID vaccines, and they have the tracking chips built into them, so
Well,
I guess we're all set with that.
I'm looking forward to Windows 11 and my COVID, you know.
Well, you can prove it. You can prove it to yourself. It works.
There you go.
Open up Google Maps now on your cell phone.
Yeah.
And it's going to know right where you are if you had the vaccine.
Thanks to Bill Gates.
Well, John,
Not Matt Gates, but Bill Gates.
in your case, because you're not smoking.
So,
Only shut off your smoking desire.
Mhm.
all right, so who's got technical questions here?
So if you listen to a person on YouTube and ask on Facebook about the 3.5-inch floppy DIY do-it-yourself tracking device, what's your thoughts on that one?
What 3.5-inch?
Well, for instead of doing the nanotechnology through the vaccine, would you go with the DIY option of installing the 3.5 floppy just below the spine?
Oh, well,
Hey, Sean, it works better than APRS.
That it does. I did get it to blip a couple times, but not consistent enough to say, hey, I figured it out.
don't ask technical questions on Facebook, kids.
I have a question. I'm thinking about installing a tall vertical antenna just on top of just a 20-foot pole at the end of my house. Does anybody have any experience with that? Just so it's not attached to my house. I've got a vertical antenna working pretty good right now, but I need to move it from where it's at and make it a more permanent solution.
Ed, you have that arrangement, right? You're muted. You're muted, Ed. We don't know sign language, so.
I'm well aware I'm muted. I am multitasking. What was the question? Listening, but I'm also tasking. What's
Brent
the
is asking about a vertical HF antenna being attached to the side of his house as a more permanent setup. And that's pretty much what you have. I don't know if yours is on the roof or next to the house, but
on the fascia plate at the peak, attached to the peak on the side opposite my garage. You've got a split level. It works very nicely. I don't think I can compete with Al for contesting because he gets a million places, but I get enough to keep me happy. 80 countries and 49 states, and I never have a problem being able to participate. I haven't heard of Zambia. I don't talk a lot to Japan or Australia, but then again, I'm not up at 3 a.m. Q sewing, so I probably could hit them as well.
just don't do that if you want Alaska, right, Ed?
I know Alaska's my Achilles heel. I have a Diamond CP6 SAR, Diamond CP6 SAR, 6-band trapped vertical from 80 meters to 6 meters, and I had the 5HS earlier, which only went up to 40 meters, but I realized when the sun went down that so did my ability to hear anybody, so I needed 80 meters. Plus, I wanted to hear people talk about QAnon and how people in pizza parlors were trafficking children. So that's all on 80 meters at night. And if you want to hear that, then you need you need a capacity hat and
A tinfoil hat.
Tinfoil hat.
Well, so my big concern, I don't want to attach anything directly to the house, and I'm going to put it on a 20-foot rigid, say 2-inch rigid
A self-supporting pole?
mast.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then,
you can do that.
anything that won't fall over or get blown over is fine.
For what bands are you looking at, Brent?
Well, I'm just starting with the 2 meter and 70 centimeter at this point, and that's all I'll do. I've got a antenna now that's working really well. I've been able to talk with a few people that they say the signal's really well, and so I'll start with that. And then if I go to other bands, I'll probably have to do some other type of tower.
Well, for VHF, UHF, height makes might. The higher you can get it, within reason, the better off you're going to be. There's, I mean, there are practical limits to that, but there's no reason why you can't have it on a mast or a small tower mast, big tower, whatever, with a vertical at some distance to the house. You probably want to keep that distance
Minimal.
as low as possible to keep your length of your feed line down. The losses in the feed line can get pretty high, especially on 440, but even on 2 meters. Losses in the feed line can get to be an issue, so you want to keep it closer to the house than further away if you can.
My own experience with that is I have my 2 meter 440 antenna mounted on a 10-foot pole on strapped to the side of my deck, and it works just fine. So, you don't have to get too elaborate. Like John said, get it up high as you can. But if you already live in an area that's high up, you can take advantage of that too. But yeah, it should work fine. You can just put it on a pole of some kind. You can get, aluminum poles or, just pipes or something like that to use as a mast, and then take it from there.
Mine is bracketed to my shed. And then I run a underground conduit between the shed and the house, and it's only about maybe 20 feet away. And then mine works fine. It's up about, I think the base was probably up around 10 or 12 feet as well.
What are you using for a feed line?
What am I using, John? I bought it from you. Berry Flex?
Oh, but it's crap, whatever it is.
Oh, okay. But it seems to work.
One of the things that I did when I first got my tech license was I built a ground plane antenna out of a panel mount SO239 connector, where I had with just coat hangers attached to it, and soldered a coat hanger to the central connect. And on the top of the coat hanger, I put a little loop and rope through it. And I noticed you have a nice looking bow in the background on your wall, and attach a fishing line to it, shoot it up over a tree and haul it up in the tree, get it really nice and high. I was getting from Wallingford, I think I was getting people on up in Massachusetts sometimes. So it was simple, not hard, not expensive, and kind of fun, and eliminated, if you can hang it off a tree that's, limb on a tree that's kind of up there and in the clear, I found that to be an excellent way to go.
So, no, I appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
Hey, Ed, how tall is that?
34 feet,
How
34 feet off the ground on the roof. I'm trying to get you the pictures, share my screen so you can see it better.
how long is the antenna?
It's 11 feet. But I've got a coax running from the length of the house into my radio. So there are losses there, but better than nothing. And I've got the UHF, VHF is right outside the window here. So that's very close. That's an X50A and a Yagi, I don't have the name of the Yagi. How about that? Well, the Yagi I got because I wasn't getting as good reception on the 440 at sometimes, but it works quite well. I'm trying to find the other picture for you here. Anyway, don't wait for me. I'm still flipping here. Need more pictures than I know what to do with. Is that it?
Hey, while you're looking, I wanted to show you guys, it's very rare that I can show something really technical to a group that really will get it right away. When I showed this to friends and family, they said, oh, that's cool. But you guys will take the coolness to a different level. So a few years ago, a number of students out of one of the universities in New York brought to me and my colleagues as a little investment group. They showed us a demo of something that they had built. And it was what they called a smart compass or a people compass. And they gave a demonstration where it was and I'll show you one of the early units, but actually functions just fine, where it has a little carabiner clip like this. And it's a compass that actually uses GPS and spread spectrum, about 1 watt. And you can have up to a dozen, or actually it's 2 dozen now, with people wearing these things. And what it does, here's the box. What it does, I'm see if you can see on the screen, it gives you the distance, the name of the person, and the distance and direction to each person in the kind of almost like a mesh network. And so you could walk around, I mean, go skiing with these things or go hiking, and you always know how far someone is away, the direction they are, and who they are. And it's the coolest thing on the planet. So they showed this to us as a prototype, and me and my other tech geeks, it just blew us away, and we gave them some investment money just to get them started. Well, then they did a crowdfunding campaign, raised $2 million, and then they got just recently another $6 million from an investment group. The U.S. Army and the Air Force are their main contractors now, and they deploy these with the military, and kind of case hardened. They're already waterproof, but actually the biggest clients are, they're using them down in before COVID, like at Disney World or big ski resorts like Vail, and they would give them out. And this way, all their people can just kind of keep track of each other. It is really the coolest thing. They operate on about 1 watt. They're on about 902 megahertz, and range, again, we're talking about 5 miles or so, and or 20 miles in the air. So they're actually using these with some of the firefighters, and they can use them with their the firefighters on the ground from the airplanes up to 20 miles.
Good idea.
How do you select who you're going to track, though?
You can type in their name.
You can,
type in their
okay.
name,
So we
and-
could give one that ends at 1J, and we could zoom in that way without having to use our fox hunting skills.
You put it on his car.
There you go.
There you
And
go.
without his knowledge.
Yeah,
Without his
tell 'em.
knowledge, yeah.
That's it. You want to slip one
That was the
into.
first thing I thought of, Eric.
Yeah,
But anyway, so anyway, this is it's
yeah, it's a nice device.
it's so cool. And again, even if you're just on a family hike and somebody is getting lost or you just know where everybody is, and it always points to that person, and you can scroll through the different names of the different groups, and up to I think it's now 24 people that you can have in the network. So it's
Is that programmable by a computer so you can load people in?
no, it's all, there's no computer interface. There's a charging interface, but no computer ports. I don't believe, unless there's a new version of that, but I don't think so. So
What's it called?
Range.
it's called Lync, Lynq. You can just look it up online. They're sold everywhere now. You can get them on Amazon or whatever.
Wow.
But it was just fun seeing a group of students with a clever idea. They're all engineers, right? They're electrical engineers. And they cobbled this together in like a class project. And they brought it in. And the way they demonstrated it, they said, hey, let's just prove it to you. So we're in a conference room. They said, let's all go outside. This was in the spring a number of years ago. And they sent one person just off running. And like, okay, just go somewhere and hide. And in 5 minutes, we'll come find you. And then the rest of us, the investors, right, we're looking. And sure enough, we came across this person who was hiding under like a bush. It was like, that proved it. They had the coolest thing.
That would save lives in an avalanche in ski country.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. That's why the ski resorts are really, they're giving them away, with the lift pass, they get them on the way back, right? So they're used. And the other thing it's doing is because, they're also getting data on flow. Like for instance, to seeing in these big amusement parks, getting a sense for the flow of traffic and where people stop at during their, and so there's a lot of, big data being
So
collected.
it's a glorified RFID, in other words.
That's in a way,
okay.
right?
That's
So anyway,
that's a big industry out in the West, like in the Rockies, where you have a lot of people that not only ski, but they go up to the Rocky Mountains and they snow sled. They've got snow sleds and there's a real risk of avalanche. So you can't go into one of those resorts out there without getting one of those devices. If you're part of a package deal, that's what you get. You get an avalanche kit, which has got one. I'm not sure if it's that device, Eric, or a similar device,
might
but
be they're taking
They
over.
have other devices that work on satellites, and you can actually push a panic button and it'll light up, and they can find you through the satellite system. Same principle, but much more sophisticated. They're several $100s, but if you're going out into the wilderness or you're sailing across the world, there was a girl that was 14 years old that was going to be the first solo girl to sail around the world. And then she got introduced to the Indian Ocean and her boat broke up and she literally pushed the button, the panic button.
I know the
And the
story.
Australian Coast Guard came out and rescued her, but otherwise she'd probably be down in Davy Jones' locker.
That's right. So Ed, W1YSM, you're already sharing. You can
Okay.
share as at will.
Okay, let's see, where's the, all right, so here, can you see this?
No.
I see your
No.
face.
See my face? Well, that's good, but it's not what I want you to see.
Not that good.
Hover your mouse over the bottom part of your screen where it says share screen. It's a green button.
I did that already.
Mm.
All right, maybe it's over in here.
There you go.
Okay, there you go. That did it.
All right, so here's the vertical. That's the peak of the house here. This is the, I think, 6 meter is here. It's not, there's no trap, and I don't think there's a trap on 10 meters either. And then you have 15 and 20 and 40 is sticking out, and then the 80 is up on top on above the capacity hat.
Wow.
Got another picture, maybe a little better. Yeah, that's a little different showing. And that's it's hooked to the fascia plate over here, if you can see that. And then I had the electrician ground it into rods into the ground, so that for lightning such as it's good. The house goes into the picture, into the computer back about, I don't know, what is it, 50 feet to my radio, which, I needed to do that. So that's the HF antenna. It's the only one I have. It's bolted. John Jusa brought his
Bucket truck.
Bucket truck, thank you. The bucket truck, and got up there, and I had my electrician there at the same time. John put it up. We got the SWR set, and then it's very easy to put together. And then the capacity hat. This has knock-on press board, withstood a couple of hurricanes already. It's got it. I think it's rated at 90 miles per hour. So thin. So that's the HF, and then here's the EHF and UHF. This is the vertical. That's the X50, and this is the Yagi. This is the other end of the house, and I got the Yagi because I wasn't getting really great reception at times, and I needed to run the Yale net on 440.
So that thing is pointed towards Yale right now?
Woodbridge.
The Woodbridge repeater.
At least as good as John and I could guesstimate it. He didn't have his compass thingy, so we tried to triangulate it and do the best we could. Here's another picture of that same setup on that side. Yeah, that's from the ground looking up. So that's pointing towards Woodbridge off in the yonder there. That's pointed towards Andromeda. And this is how USA hooks things to houses. The ridiculous looking thing, which I'll have to take down because now, of course, we have to get the house resited. Thank you very much. So this is what I was used to receive, essentially armchair copy, and I couldn't hear a thing on this antenna on 440 at the same time. So I could transmit on this. This transmission was scratchy and really hard to hear, but this had great reception. This one had no reception, but great transmission. That's what the spatial and the frequency diversity I talked about on the coffee cup, and that was all about.
Yeah, they're very close to each other, Ed. Are you sure they're not detuning each other?
They may well be.
Yeah.
I don't know. They may well be. Although I was having trouble before I put this up. I really would like to point this probably at Killingworth. I probably get, although I get really good reception there.
Killingworth is on 2 meters, and that's a 440 beam.
Right, but they're linked. I link them. When I do the weather net, I link 440 and 145.29.
You transmit, when you're linking, do you transmit on 440 or 2 meters?
I transmit on 2 meters because I get
Yeah.
better signal, and then it links to 440. So
Got
I
it.
He has to activate the link on 440, Rob.
Right. As soon
Okay,
as I activate the link, I go to 2 meters and stay there.
got it.
Yeah.
So you need the beam.
Right, but with Yale, we don't link. They're not allowing us to link for reasons I don't understand. I was told by K1SOX it's because they the Echo link, which is what they want to, which they use on 440. They don't want to have me accept Echo link linking to 145 as well. So I don't know. They won't let me do a link to 145, which I would then use, and Echo link. They say the Echo link annoys 145, so they won't let me do it.
I don't understand that, but whatever.
I don't either. But you don't want to bite the hand that feeds me, so I don't.
That's right.
So I have no idea what this is. This is that. Anyway, that was for the benefit of Brent. Is that clear, Brent?
Yeah, no, it's clear, and that's exactly the kind of setup I'll have. Only rather than put it on the house, I'll have a rigid pole going
Yeah,
up,
that's fine.
basically in the same place. And so I'm thinking the same thing is, maybe I'll end up with one setup on one end of the house and one setup on the other.
Yeah, you can see here, this is a metal pole that the antenna is, it's bolted into the fascia plate. There's the top of the antenna, or the bottom of the antenna, and it's up there. So it's and this goes up to like 130 miles an hour. And then over here, it's hard to see, but the ground wire that the electrician is grounding that antenna as well, plus this one, is going off to the side and then down past the electrical service into the ground, and copper rods buried again over there as well.
So that's one of my concerns. If I put an antenna on a pole and the pole is in the ground 3 or 4 feet, do I still need to ground the pole?
I would. 8-foot
Yeah,
ground is the
yeah.
code.
You're gonna need to ground your pole with an 8-foot rod in the ground. So what Ed's got up on the screen right now, he's got more wind loading on that little 440 than he's got on that VHF.
Vertical, yeah.
And that's because he's got what do you got, a 5 or 10-foot pole there, Ed?
This is
No, the UHF.
oh, the UHF. This is yeah, this is wooden though. That's wooden.
That's wood.
That's a wood pole.
Yes, I believe, I'm almost positive that's wood.
Well, how long is it though?
It's well, it looks like it's probably around 8 feet.
So you don't know. Okay, so I'm going to say it's 10 foot. You've got more wind loading now that it's wood on that than you do on the VHF. That VHF has got maybe a foot worth of pole on there. So there's no way you would need any guy wires on it. I don't think you need guy wires on the wood pole with the standoff type amount on your side of your house.
Yeah.
If you were able to put up like say 30 or 40 foot pole, even if based in the ground, you might need guy wires, Brent. That's my point here.
Yeah, I didn't need guy wires for the other UHF.
The HF, no, that's very short too. I saw that too.
Well, that one's 11 feet. That's
Nah, you don't need something for 10 feet. If you're going to put that up 20 or 30 feet, you might
yeah,
need guy
right.
wires.
Yeah, that was one of my concerns too, and maybe the way I might install the pole would be close enough to the house where I would anchor the pole to the house. I just really wanted to stay away from that, from attaching things to the house. That was all my big concern was.
Yeah, I wasn't
so
really fond of putting holes in the side like this, but Yusa, when he gets going,
yeah, they make
Tell me what
you
he
know
was
they've
doing it.
they got really great wood caulk right now, Ed. So I have no problem drilling into my roof or my side of my house. It's going in there because I want a sturdy thing that's not going to rip my antenna down
Yeah.
at the worst time possible, like when I'm walking by or one of my family members or my neighbor.
Yeah, yeah. And so the lead-in wires go right through the opening here, and then they go across
Pardon?
the attic and down into my room. So it works. It's just my
Yeah,
is right on the other side of that wall, pretty much.
Yeah, that's exactly the setup. That's almost exactly what I'm thinking. In finished product. It's just that instead of putting something to the house, I was gonna have it go to the ground in a pole. But that's probably the setup I'm gonna end up with, just like that.
Okay, and so that's yeah, I thought they were kind of close together, so there may be some problems as you guys point out. So we'll see how. But this has been this
there it is.
This has been really fine. And here again, the
Yeah, that's maybe what, 2 feet?
what, this whole thing? That's 11.
No, the pole.
The mast it's
Oh,
mounted on.
this?
Yeah.
This is actually, it's a J, it's a bent pole. This is a metal pole that's bolted in here and here and here so that it doesn't move. And
Really?
then there's a I don't know,
see.
another face plate that holds it in place here. But
But
it's
the
bolted
vertical
in
part,
here.
the vertical part looks like about 2 feet.
Yeah,
Yes,
about a foot and a
that's
half
correct.
off the roof. Yeah.
Yeah, that's nothing, Ed. That's very sturdy. That's
Yeah.
a stout little
Wires,
antenna mount.
Yeah.
I wanted to
good-
dye it, but I decided
No.
not to.
Nah,
In
you
a
don't
good
need that.
snowstorm, that might be under snow though.
Well, the thought was I just transmitted and melt it. That's what someone
Okay.
suggested.
You gotta
Well,
put a
that-
linear, you
that's
gotta
my
put an
concern.
amplifier on it, Ed.
The way you have that bolted to your house, if the wind did rip it, would it rip your house?
Yeah, you got more problems than that.
Yes, it would.
If the wind is that high, yeah, it's
And
probably
thanks
gonna
for
take the
mentioning
roof
it. I
off.
appreciate that. Thank you. Yes.
But these are all great examples. This is a great example of,
Well,
every installation is a little bit different than the last one.
Yeah, that's why I figured I'd bring this to you guys, because I guarantee you've all been through it a couple more times than I ever have.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's it. So I will unshare my screen. Go back to my rock.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was helpful.
You go back under your rack, Ed.
There's more worms under there. It's tastier. So
Yeah, well, you got more protein.
There you go, meat.
Hey, I have to sign off. I'm gonna try and make a little bit of a late dinner here, but before I do, I just wanted, you guys maybe were talking about this before I came on and at the start of it, but just pass along my sympathies to the club. Elsie and I have only been a member for 6-7 years. You obviously have known Bill for most of you much longer, but he was one of the first persons I met. He was cordial and inviting when I first walked in the door, and always made me feel very much at home, and Elsie too. And I haven't even been able to type a note into the email thread because everything I started to type seemed, I just couldn't, I'd rather say something in person. So anyway,
Yeah.
just really heartfelt sympathies from Elsie and I. Just a real gentleman. I saw that word used a lot, and just a conscientious person who's always welcoming for a thought or a comment. And I just wanted to say that before I signed off. It's been kind of a real melancholy time since I saw that message, and for Elsie as well.
you can go on the Wallingford Funeral Home, and they have a online book you can sign in with a couple of words. I did that. The club is going to talk about it at the business meeting, and we're going to come up with some suitable remembrance, probably related to his CW activities, and memorialize him that way. Plus, we're discussing what to do with the repeater, because as has been pointed out, the repeater is no longer valid since the trustee is an SK.
Steve changed that today.
Yeah, it's been changed.
Change. So it's W1.
He did it very quickly. W1 NRG now.
So we realized that he apparently was very close to the best with most people with this, and it was just
He was the oldest member of the club, wasn't he, or the longest member of the club.
I think he was the longest.
I think he beat Sweedock on that.
Yep.
So he's been a member of the club since he was a kid, going back a long time, probably the
Absolutely.
50s.
Probably the 50s.
That's really something. Well, just the commitment and it's just that I'm at a loss. I'm a writer and I'm at a loss for words. So just anyway, just
Yeah.
wanted to let you know that it's just wanted to communicate that to the group here on behalf of LC. So
But
anyone, thanks for everything you do. Thanks for keeping up the spirit and
Okay.
for these sorts of things. And I got to sign off and whip up a little bit of dinner. But thank you very much. And,
Yeah,
and
tell Elsie congratulations on the kids' clinical trial.
yeah, they're very excited about that. 100% effective for kids. And that's
That's
just,
really good.
that's they're they're looking at, they're following all this data. They got to follow everyone for a couple of years, and it's a really lot of work on their part. And when those types of things come out, give Elsie an extra hug, because I know it's just really hard stuff. So thanks. I'll make sure I pass that along. All right. Take care, everyone.
So long.
Be good, everyone.
Sayonara.
All right. See you. Bye.
I just want to say, I've been licensed a little over 20 years, and when I first got my first ticket and my first radio, Bill was my first QSO.
Yeah, he was very welcoming to me when I walked in.
And Bill was the driving force behind that repeater surviving. Bill and I and a couple other people spent many, many cold nights up at Paul Boardman's shed on Schoolhouse Road, trying to work the bugs out of that repeater. And Bill applied his engineering skills, and piece by piece was able to upgrade the equipment to the point where it became a very reliable repeater. And he's really the driving force behind that.
Well, I tell you one thing that I remember Bill about was field day. Bill was I came to that first field day, and I think it was 2012. And here's Bill. He's bopping around. He's making sure this is going, that's going. I met Rich there, and I realized, what is this Bill guy? Oh, he's the president of the club. And here's this guy. He's operating gear. He's making sure stuff goes up. He's got a double G5 RV antenna strung up between trees up there, and I was totally hooked and totally impressed.
Was that at Godex, or was that up at Marcus Cook?
Marcus Cook. I never knew Godex.
And right to the bitter end, Bill was always, real hams go out in the field for field day. They don't operate at the EOC. As we got older and older, and just this past winter, Bill was still skiing. So
That's right. He was a
stayed
skier.
fit. He stayed fit. This must have happened pretty quickly to him, because he
Yeah,
was still active.
Apparently, yeah. Well, some people, have this, and it depends on a whole bunch of different variables, but he went pretty quickly, I would think, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. He was.
We all have our stories. So
Oh gosh.
Yeah, it's still hard to sinking in. It's still hard.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I have to say this though, the one thing that really set the hook was that same field day. I watched him and Bob Carruthers, who's in the Hollywood Squares tonight, get this salad bowl antenna set up for satellite communication. I'm like, what are these guys doing with this? Two salad bowls that are just resting in each other with this arrow antenna on top of a tripod. And they've got this, I don't know if it was an 817 or an 857 or some sort of 2 meter 440 cross banding radio that they're bouncing a signal through a satellite on single sideband CW, making a contact for field day. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what are these guys not capable of? They're capable of everything here. I just was so impressed.
Yeah, he was a giant. He was a good friend and a mentor and an Elmer.
Yeah.
And whatever. And I mean, he and I certainly had our moments, as anybody who ever spent any time with Bill had their Bill moments.
yeah, the people like that you talk about as being mentors and tormentors.
Door
Well,
mentors.
before there were packet clusters, we used to get on the repeater and post DX. So if somebody heard, you know, a station in Tibet or something on 20 meters, you'd get on and you give the call, and you'd go on 14240 listing up 5 or something. And, you know, this is before it all became automated with these packet clusters, and there wasn't a lot of people doing it. And we're all trying to chase down 300 countries. And Bill worked, and he had his radio in his office. He worked from home. He was one of the original work from home guys, and he had his radio right in his office. So he could be in the middle of doing work for business, doing up quotes for integrated circuits. Somebody would come along with a posting, and he'd jump right on the air and hit that station. He was very good at that. And we also used to listen to the Long Island DX Association repeater in Long Island, and we'd steal their postings and relay them onto our repeater. And for quite a few years, we were very active doing that. Back in the late 70s, I think it was.
Yeah, he was the glue that held the club together for a long time. And
All right, guys, I'm going to jump out too. So everybody have a good evening.
Okay.
Eric,
Hi, guys, I'm
Right, I'm
jumping
going
out.
over to the traffic net, gentlemen. Take care.
Okay.
Have a good night.
See ya.
the repeater just ID'd W1NRG. It's still funny to hear it, but well. All right, I'm gonna rock and roll myself here. And
Nice to see you, John.
yeah, you too, Bob. How you doing, Bob?
I'm kind of down. I really I got bladder cancer, and it's aggressive cancer, and they got it very early through dumb luck, and so I stand a pretty good chance of living a long life. I guess I'm going to have to be catheterized on a regular basis, which don't float my boat too much, but hey, we're still here.
That's what matters.
And so I'm kind of, you know, I spent 2 weeks flat on my back, not moving too much. And at my age, you do that and it takes a lot out of you. And so I'm starting to come back slowly, you know.
Well, keep at it. That's good.
Well,
That's good. Well, I hope you're going to have a full and complete recovery. And
well, yeah, but you know, I'm 73 now, and I ain't saying goodbye this year.
you're an old fart, Bob. Jesus. Holy crap.
I think everybody here is an old fart.
I didn't think anybody was that old.
Well, I'm pretty close.
All right, guys, I'll see you later. I'm gonna head out.
See you, Jim.
Okay.
See you
Best
tomorrow night.
wishes to all. Hey, happy Easter. Hope the
Yep.
Easter bunny was good to everybody.
Oh, yeah. Take care. Nice to hear you, Jim. 73.
I'm going to go make my, thinking of Bill, I'm going to make my Easter kielbasa from Philippex. That was just something else Bill and I always argued about, was who had the best kielbasa.
He liked Shapiga, didn't he?
Yeah, he was a big Shapiga fan, and
Yeah.
I always said, no, Philippex is better.
I always liked Philippex.
I
Yeah.
always like kielbasa. I don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Bill introduced me to steamed cheeseburgers.
Ah,
Wisms, we used to call them. It's an old story, but used to when we were setting up field day at Godak's farm, we'd set up until we lost the light, which is about 9 o'clock the end of June. And then we'd all go to a bunch of us would go to Ted's after that for steamed cheeseburgers. And those were some great fun times back in those days. But yeah, we're having fun now and we're making new memories, and God knows these young whippersnappers will be talking about us like this when we're gone. So anyway, I'm going to say goodnight to everybody.
Hey, John.
Good night.
See you later, John. Bye,
All right,
guys.
here.
7-3 all.
7-3.
Yeah. Okay, I guess everybody's off. So good night. See you guys.
Take care, Ted.